Welcome in this popcorn video Les Caspérides, in which we're gonna talk about the Estonian braid. The Estonian braid, also known as lateral braid, what is it, what's the point, and how to knit it? That's what we're gonna see together, but first, what do we need? In order to do the Estonian braid, we do not need anything that we do not already have, just a knit. The Estonian braid is a braid that will come horizontally on a knit, as we can see here. It will create an horizontal braid, but also vertical stitches. To knit it, we're going to use a start technique, an older row one, and a final one. For the starting point, we need to cast on one stitch. I prefer an English cast on because it is smoother. To do so, we take a knit and turn on the wrong side with yarn on back. We take the first stitch on the left needle knitwise, being careful with the marker. We make a stitch and place it on the left needle. I go back on the right side with yarn in back. The stitch that we've just created is on the right needle. She's here. We're going to use this stitch till the end of row and then bind it off as its mission will be accomplished. We slip it to the left needle, and from now on I'm going to show you the all of the row technique. First, we're going to seek the second stitch on the left needle through back loop, keeping the stitch on the left needle. Then, we're going to knit the first stitch by the front yarn, by the front loop, a usual knit stitch. We've created two stitches on the right needle. Here they are. So we're going to release two stitches as well from the left needle. To repeat, I slip the first stitch of the right needle to the left one, knit the second stitch through back loop, knit the first stitch, release both. And we can see that the braid slowly appears. We're going to repeat the steps till the end of row. As you can see, we've created a lateral braid. What matters is that the Estonian braid does not only create this braid, but also vertical stitches. That's normal because a knit always goes vertically, from the bottom up or from the top down, but still vertically. In this particular pattern, for instance, of gets, here I have the children's version. The vertical rows created by the braid are taken into account for the number of rows between each part to make sure the design is symmetrical. Just remember these ghost rows when you knit. I go on, slipping. Yeah, here we are. Slipping the first stitch, knitting the second one through back loop, knitting the first, releasing both. Now we're gonna see what happens in case of emergency, how to fix a mistake. Here's the mistake I made, part for being clumsy, part for teaching reasons. As you can see, a stitch from the lateral ones is released with no yarn to keep it safe. That's an emergency. She definitely needs a yarn friend and quickly. To help this poor little stitch, I'm gonna remember the most important things. The yarn belongs to the first stitch on the right needle, and obviously no stitch has to be left. In this case, the yarn is well placed, but this poor little thing has no one. That's not okay. So I'm gonna unravel the first stitch, but still I obtain one lost stitch. That's normal. In an Estonian braid, when there is a mistake, we must go several steps behind to fix it. Why is that? Just remember, we did knit several times the same stitch to create the braid. So we need to unravel until we are back to normal. And here we are. The yarn belongs to the first stitch on the right needle with no stitch left lost by itself. And we're good again. This little demo shall show you what to do when a mistake was made during an Estonian braid. Just remember to unravel several stitches to fix it. That's to be expected, as it was knitted several times as well. Now we're going to see the end of row technique. I kept knitting the braid and here I am. This is pretty nice. Now it's just me and the last stitch. To build the braid, I used to slip the first stitch from the right needle to the left one, as you remember easily. I won't do this time. I'm gonna knit the last stitch instead through front loop. I knit it very usually. Then I'm gonna bind off the second stitch on the right needle by slipping it over the first one. I slip the second stitch over the first one. This ends the braid quite harmoniously. At this point, the pattern calls for a knit row, so I'll do it, but follow the instruction of yours, obviously. And that's it! As you can see, there is a demarcation between the last and first stitches of row. This is because we created two rows in one. An horizontal one and a vertical one. And unfortunately, I did not find a way to reduce this gap until now. But nevertheless, I still like it a lot. You can use this technique anytime. It's pretty, it's easy, even if it requires some time. Just remember, the last stitch of an Estonian braid is knitted normally. Then the second stitch is slipped over to say thanks and goodbye to the stitch we've created at the beginning. Et voilà!